Are you ever going to leave, Elena? Daniel sneered, reclining on the sofa. You heard him, Natalie added, curling her lips into a cruel smile. This house is too small for 3 adults. Too small. I replied evenly. And yet somehow, you both managed to fit your affair in it. They smirked in unison. You've got until tonight, Daniel said, or we toss you out ourselves. I'll leave, I agreed, walking back. But I promise you'll regret it. Earlier that day. The day had started like any other. I jumped on a Zoom call, sending off designs to a client. I had just wrapped up the presentation and closed my laptop when I heard the garage door open. Daniel was home early, again. I sighed and went downstairs, my mind already swirling with the questions that had plagued me for weeks. What's up with you coming home in the middle of the day so often? I asked, opening the fridge to prepare lunch. Work's changed, Daniel said curtly, not meeting my eyes. Taking on a new project with Natalie. It's demanding. I paused, gripping a butter knife more tightly than necessary. Natalie, huh? You two seem to get along well. Daniel shrugged. She's ambitious. Knows what she wants. That was it. I decided today would be different. I'd find my proof. I waited until he left for another urgent meeting and went directly to his study. My fingers trembled as I rifled through his desk drawers, until I found exactly what I was looking for. There it was. A receipt for 2 at that swanky restaurant he always claimed he could never afford to take me to. And another, a hotel receipt. Room for 2. Also in Natalie's name. Just as I put the papers back, I heard the front door open. Daniel's voice, loud and carefree, floated through the hallway. My heart raced. I barely had time to hide the evidence before they walked in. Well, look who's curious, Natalie purred, leaning against the doorframe. Her presence in my home was like a cold slap to the face. What's the meaning of this? I snapped, holding up the receipts. Oh, those? Daniel said nonchalantly. Natalie's moving in. There's no room for you anymore, Elena. My mind swirled, emotions clashing like a storm, but I locked them down immediately. I set the receipts carefully on the desk and squared my shoulders. You both can have your fun, I said calmly, stepping forward. But let me assure you, it's going to cost you. Like we care, Natalie laughed, linking arms with Daniel. There's the door. I walked out without another word. The weight of betrayal tried to anchor me down, but I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Through sheer will, I made it up to the bedroom. I pulled out an old suitcase and began to pack. My phone buzzed. It was Lillian, my daughter, checking in from college. I stared at her message for a beat, tears threatening to spill. I typed back briskly. Everything's fine. See you soon. Then, I picked up the phone again, this time to make a call that would set my new plan in motion. Arranging a junk removal service for tomorrow without raising suspicion was crucial. As I moved through the house, removing traces of my life piece by piece, a realization settled in my bones. I wasn't just packing up my things. I was clearing space for something new. Something stronger. The next morning, I woke up early and started packing my things discreetly. I knew Daniel and Natalie would be sleeping in, probably enjoying their little victory. My hands moved quickly but quietly. Drawer by drawer, I filled my suitcase with necessities. I took one last look around our room. Daniel's scent still lingered on the bedsheets. I shook my head, dismissing the sentiment. It was time to move on. My phone buzzed. Yes, I answered quietly. I need the junk removal service today. As soon as possible. Got it, ma'am, the voice on the other end confirmed. We'll be there in an hour. I headed to the kitchen to gather a few more things. As I wrapped up, I heard footsteps on the staircase. Daniel walked in, rubbing his eyes. He looked mildly surprised to see me. "You're still here?" he asked, a hint of annoyance creeping into his voice. "Yes, but not for long," I replied coolly, continuing to pack a box. "The removal service will be here soon." He snorted. "Trying to make this dramatic, aren't you?" "Just ensuring I don't leave anything behind," I said, not bothering to look at him. He returned upstairs, presumably to inform his dear Natalie. I knew they wouldn't cause a scene while the removal crew was here. Moments later, a knock at the door announced their arrival. "Morning, ma'am." "What needs to go?" the lead guy asked, glancing around. "Everything," I replied steadily. "Every last piece that isn't nailed down." The team got to work, moving swiftly through the house. I busied myself with smaller items, directing them now and then. From the corner of my eye, I spotted Lillian's photo on the mantel. Her bright smile gave me strength. I tucked the photo safely into my handbag. One of the team members gave me a sympathetic look. I didn't need their pity. I needed to stay focused. Daniel and Natalie eventually parked themselves on the couch, watching the proceedings like hawks. Natalie smirked at me. "Feels good to downsize, doesn't it?" she taunted. I met her gaze calmly. "We'll see who downsizes in the end," I replied, my words laced with a subtle promise. Once most of my belongings were packed, I took a moment to send a message to Lillian, updating her indirectly. Later that afternoon, after everything was loaded up, I left the house with one final glance. "See you around," I said to Daniel and Natalie. Their laughter followed me to the driveway, but it didn't shake me. At the hotel, I set my bags down and dialed my lawyer. "Mr. Bennett, it's Elena Dawson. I'd like to discuss my rights and next steps." "Of course, Elena," he replied. "Let's set up a meeting for tomorrow." I hung up and let out a breath. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. Next, I dialed Lillian. Her voice on the other end brought immediate comfort. "Hey, Mom. You okay?" "I'm fine, sweetie, just moving into a hotel for a while. I didn't want to worry you before your exams." "Don't worry about me," Lillian assured. "We'll get through this." As we talked, a surge of determination filled me. Daniel and Natalie thought they had me cornered, but they underestimated my resolve. With Lillian's support and a few strategic moves, they'd soon realize their mistake. Once off the call, I laid out a new plan. Tomorrow, I'd consult my lawyer, start gathering evidence, and prepare for what was to come. Tonight, however, was for rest and regrouping. The real battle was about to begin. The following morning, I met with Mr. Bennett. He was a sharp, seasoned lawyer who immediately understood the complexity of my situation. "Good to see you, Elena. Let's go over your options," he said, spreading out some paperwork. "I want to make sure I'm protected, and that Daniel and Natalie face consequences for what they've done," I said firmly. "We can start with a formal separation agreement to secure your rights and then consider divorce. Additionally, if you have any evidence of infidelity or financial misconduct, it will strengthen your case," Mr. Bennett explained. I nodded. "I have some receipts and bank statements. I also suspect there's more if I dig deeper into his work files." He leaned forward, intrigued. "That could be very useful. Document everything and make copies. We need to build a solid case." Leaving his office, I felt more empowered, but the work was just beginning. First, I called Lillian. "Hey, Mom. How did it go?" she asked. "Good. We have a plan. Can you check Dad's old laptop? He might have left something incriminating. Sure, I'll check tonight, Lillian agreed. Stay strong, Mom. I headed to a local cafe to start organizing the financial documents. The more I examined them, the clearer it became that Daniel had been hiding money, a lot of it. I noted everything down, preparing for what was to come. Later that evening, Lillian called me back, sounding excited. Mom, I found something. Dad's been transferring large sums to an account I've never seen before, must be offshore. Great work, Lillian, I said, a smile spreading across my face. We'll include that in our evidence. We arranged to meet the next day to go over everything she had found. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with the possibilities. Early the next morning, I reached out to a moving company to help Lillian pack up her things from the house. As the movers arrived, Daniel stormed outside, his face flushed with anger. What is all this? He demanded, glaring at Lillian and the movers. Just moving out what belongs to Mom and me, Lillian replied calmly. There's no place for our things here anymore, right? Daniel fumed. You'll regret this. I think you're the one who'll regret everything, she shot back, not backing down. I watched from a distance, proud of her strength. Later, Lillian met me at the hotel with her findings. Look at this, she said, handing me printouts. Dad's been funneling money through fake accounts, and Natalie's been in on it. I scanned the documents, my resolve hardening. This was exactly what we needed. Excellent work, Lillian. We'll hand these over to Mr. Bennett first thing tomorrow. As we packed up the documents, my phone rang. Daniel's furious voice came through the line. You took the furniture. I can't even sit down in my own house. I let him rant before replying. Should have thought of that before you betrayed me, Daniel. You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon. He spat a curse and hung up. Lillian and I exchanged looks, both of us knowing we were just getting started. Tomorrow, I'd meet with Mr. Bennett about the financial inconsistencies and prepare our next move. By evening, we had moved into a nearby hotel, ready to strategize further. Lillian stayed close, working with me to compile everything we needed. The calm before the storm allowed us to strengthen our bond and sharpen our focus. As we settled in for the night, Lillian turned to me with a determined look. We'll make them pay, Mom. They won't know what hit them. I nodded, feeling a fierce determination rise within me. Daniel and Natalie thought they could walk all over us, but they'd soon learn the cost of betrayal. It was time to hit them where it hurt the most. The next morning, I woke early to meet with Mr. Bennett. The evidence Lillian had found was pivotal. We presented everything, the financial transfers, the offshore account, and Natalie's involvement. Mr. Bennett reviewed the documents with a steely expression. This is substantial, Elena. We'll leverage this information to our advantage. Good. I want Daniel and Natalie to feel the full weight of their actions, I replied, my voice unwavering. Back at the hotel, Lillian and I continued plotting. Then my phone rang. It was Daniel, and he sounded panicked. What did you do with the furniture, Elena? He demanded. Missing a comfy seat, Daniel. How are all your new girlfriends doing? You know damn well we can't replace those things easily, he growled. Maybe we can strike a deal. I smirked. Oh, now he wanted to negotiate. Too bad. He was about to learn the hard way. Some betrayals come with a steep price. I seized the opportunity. Wire $55,000 to my account, and I'll tell you where your precious chairs are. I'll think about it, Daniel stammered before hanging up. That got him rattled, Lillian noted with a grin. I nodded. And this is just the beginning. The following days were crucial. Desperate to reclaim his things, Daniel foolishly transferred the money. I redirected it to cover moving expenses. With that part of the plan executed, it was time for the next strike. I called Daniel again. Have you thought about my offer? All right, he said begrudgingly. Send them back, but this better be everything. Patience, I replied. Check your email for the address. After hanging up, I returned to finalizing our evidence. Every detail had to be airtight. Once everything was in place, I created an anonymous email and attached the files. Mr. Callahan is going to have a field day with this, I muttered, hitting send. Within hours, chaos erupted. Daniel called, his voice frantic. Elena, my boss wants to see me. What did you do? Oh, just made sure the right people got the right information, I said smoothly. Your reckless actions deserve attention. You're playing with fire, he hissed. No, Daniel, I countered. I'm controlling the blaze you started. The next morning, Mr. Callahan reached out. He wanted to discuss the evidence and its potential consequences. I agreed to meet him at his office, bringing Mr. Bennett along. As we entered, Mr. Callahan greeted us with a solemn expression. Mrs. Dawson, thank you for coming. I'm disturbed by what I've reviewed. I felt it was necessary to bring this to your attention, I said. Mr. Bennett laid out the details. Daniel and Natalie have been manipulating company finances and violating multiple policies. I trust you understand the gravity of the situation. Mr. Callahan nodded. We'll conduct a full investigation, but this looks serious. There will be severe consequences for both parties. As we left the office, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Justice was closing in. Lillian hugged me. What's our next step? She asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. Now, we let the dominoes fall, I said confidently. Later that day, Daniel called again, sounding desperate. They suspended me, Elena. They're investigating everything. You need to fix this. I won't fix your mess, Daniel, I replied coldly. You brought this on yourself. Minutes later, Natalie was on the line. You treacherous, do you know what you've done? Yes, Natalie, I said calmly. I made sure you finally face the consequences of your actions. You'll regret this, she threatened before hanging up. Lillian and I spent the rest of the evening finalizing our legal steps, ensuring every part of our case was airtight. The next morning, news of Daniel and Natalie's suspension broke. Their dirty laundry was now public, and the fallout was immediate. We returned to the office to finalize our statements. Daniel and Natalie were already there, looking defeated. Daniel made one last attempt. Elena, let's talk this through. We can settle this quietly. I shook my head. There's no quiet way out of this, Daniel. You've lost all respect and integrity. Mr. Callahan stepped in. Mr. Dawson, Miss Carter, the evidence is overwhelming. The company is pressing charges, and civil suits will follow. Panic flashed across Daniel's face. He turned on Natalie. This is all your fault. You pushed for this. Me? She shrieked. You were in it up to your neck. Their bickering filled the room, each trying to shift the blame. A symphony of desperation and guilt. Finally, I faced them both. You underestimated me. You thought I'd just disappear quietly. Not a chance. But in the end, they gave me exactly what I needed, the fire to fight back. As we stepped out of the office, I felt Lillian's hand slip into mine. We were stronger now, united. We had faced them down and come out victorious. That night, we celebrated quietly, knowing the battle wasn't fully over but recognizing how far we had come. Over dinner, Lillian looked at me, admiration shining in her eyes. You did it, Mom. You stood your ground, and they paid for it. We did it, I corrected, raising my glass. Together. From that moment on, our focus shifted to rebuilding our lives, our home, our future. Daniel and Natalie's legal battle would rage on, but we had already won the greatest victory, reclaiming our dignity and strength. The next day, they were summoned to company headquarters. Word of their crimes had spread, and the air was thick with tension. Lillian and I decided to witness the spectacle firsthand, blending into the background of the bustling corporate offices. We watched as Daniel and Natalie were led into a large conference room, where Mr. Callahan and several executives awaited. The room fell silent as the doors shut behind them. Mr. Callahan stood, a thick stack of papers in his hands. His expression was unreadable. Daniel. Natalie. The evidence against you is overwhelming: embezzlement, fraud, and misappropriation of funds. We've begun a full audit, and the preliminary findings are damning. Daniel's face flushed. This is absurd. I demand to speak to someone higher up. There is no higher up for you, Mr. Callahan said firmly. You've betrayed this company and its employees. Natalie's voice wavered as she tried to interject. We can explain. Save it, another executive cut in coldly. We're pressing charges, and we will ensure you are held accountable to the fullest extent. Daniel turned on Natalie, his eyes wild with panic. You idiot. You were supposed to keep those records clean. I did everything you asked, she snapped. If you hadn't been so greedy. Their argument spiraled into chaos, loud enough to echo down the halls. Lillian and I exchanged a knowing glance, grimly satisfied as we watched their public meltdown. A senior executive cleared his throat. Enough. His voice cut through the room like a knife. You will both be escorted out and served with notice of termination and legal action. Desperation overtook Daniel. Please, there must be something we can do to fix this. For a fleeting second, Mr. Callahan's expression softened. Then he steeled himself. The time for fixing things is long past, he said. You are a liability to this company and a disgrace to your positions. As Daniel and Natalie were led out, heads hanging low, Lillian and I quietly exited the building. Outside, she turned to me, eyes glowing with satisfaction. That was intense. Yes, I agreed. But it was necessary. They needed to face the consequences. We didn't have much time to reflect before the next phase of our plan set into motion. I worked with Mr. Bennett to finalize my divorce and ensure all our claims were airtight. Then the story leaked to the press. Daniel and Natalie's personal lives unraveled at an alarming speed. Reporters camped outside their homes, hounding them for comments. Their reputations, once so carefully crafted, crumbled with every new revelation. Back at the hotel, Lillian and I were inundated with calls, old friends, acquaintances, even former colleagues expressing their shock and support. It was heartening to know we weren't alone. One evening, Lillian looked up from her laptop. Mom, have you seen this? She turned the screen toward me. A news article detailed Natalie's involvement in another company's scandal years ago, evidence of a pattern of unethical behavior. This will bury her, I said, forwarding the article to Mr. Callahan. Every skeleton in their closets will come out now. That night, Daniel called again. But this time, his voice was broken. Elena, please. Can we talk? There's nothing left to talk about, I said firmly. You made your choices. Now live with them. The line went dead. And with it, I felt an overwhelming sense of closure. Lillian wrapped her arm around me. We did it, Mom. They're finally facing what they deserve. Yes, we did, I agreed, hugging her tightly. And it's finally over. As we prepared to move back into our home, a sense of renewal filled the air. We were stronger, free from their grasp, and finally moving forward. Daniel and Natalie would continue to unravel, but their downfall no longer consumed our lives. Then, the final blow struck. The evening news flashed with their mugshots. Daniel and Natalie had been officially arrested for embezzlement and fraud. The polished personas they once flaunted were now reduced to shameful headlines. Lillian and I watched the broadcast from our new living room, the weight of our struggle finally lifting. "They're actually going to jail," Lillian murmured, almost in disbelief. "Justice has a way of catching up," I replied. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find officials seizing Daniel's assets. Electronics, artwork, even his beloved car, everything was being taken. Across the street, a neighbor watched, eyes wide with curiosity. "This is just the beginning," one of the officers remarked. "There's a lot more to account for." I nodded and stepped back inside. Lillian looked up from her studies, smiling. "Mom, did you see that? They took his car." "I saw, sweetheart," I said, sitting beside her. "It's all falling apart for them." A week later, we entered the courtroom for the preliminary hearing. Daniel and Natalie sat at the defense table, disheveled and hollow-eyed, their lawyers whispering urgently. It was the end of the road for them. And the beginning of something new for us. But the damage was already done. Mr. Bennett sat beside me, exuding calm confidence. "This will be swift. They don't have a leg to stand on," he assured. The judge read out the charges, detailing every egregious crime. As the list grew longer, Daniel fidgeted, shooting desperate glances at Natalie. Lillian squeezed my hand, offering silent support. The prosecutor presented our evidence, each piece more damning than the last. When they showed the financial transfers to the offshore account, the courtroom buzzed with disbelief. Finally, Daniel broke. "It was all Natalie's idea," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger. "She orchestrated everything." "Liar! You told me to do it." Natalie shrieked back, her face contorted with rage. The judge banged his gavel. "Order in the court," he commanded before turning to address them. "Your actions have consequences. Prepare for the full force of the law." Leaving the courthouse, Lillian and I felt an incredible sense of liberation. This was the turning point, the moment they had to face the repercussions of their heinous actions. In the ensuing weeks, Daniel and Natalie were convicted, their sentences making headlines. The once powerful duo had become a cautionary tale in our community. Meanwhile, Lillian and I focused on rebuilding our lives. The house felt lighter, filled with new memories and hopes. One evening over dinner, Lillian looked at me with a contented smile. "We've come a long way, Mom. I'm proud of us." "I'm proud of you too, Lillian," I replied, my heart swelling with gratitude. "You've been my rock through all this." As our lives began to stabilize, I received a surprising message from Olivia, an old college friend who had heard about my ordeal. She invited me for coffee. It had been years since I'd seen her, and the idea of reconnecting felt like a new beginning. The cafe meeting was delightful. We laughed, reminisced, and, for the first time in a long while, I felt the joy of genuine friendship without the shadow of betrayal over us. Returning home, Lillian greeted me warmly. "How was it?" she asked. "Wonderful," I said, hugging her. "We're finally moving forward." Daniel and Natalie's trials neared their end, and their severe sentences cemented their fates. Watching the news report, Lillian whispered, "They got what they deserved." "Yes, they did," I affirmed without regret. "And we got our peace back." As we looked ahead, our bond stronger than ever, a sense of complete closure enveloped us. The storm had passed, leaving clear skies and the promise of brighter days. With Daniel and Natalie behind bars, life took on a new rhythm. Lillian and I settled comfortably into our home. Mornings were no longer filled with dread but with the promise of new beginnings. I found solace in my work as a graphic designer, delving into projects with renewed enthusiasm. One sunny morning, as I sipped coffee on the porch, Lillian joined me with her laptop. "Mom, I've been thinking, how about we start a small business together? We could combine our skills, your design expertise and my marketing knowledge." I looked at her, surprised but excited. "That's a great idea, Lillian. We could create something meaningful, something ours." She beamed. "Let's brainstorm tonight. I have so many ideas." That evening turned into a planning session filled with laughter and creativity. We mapped out our venture, imagining a future untainted by past betrayals. The name we chose, Resilient Designs, felt appropriate, encapsulating our journey and newfound strength. Days turned into weeks, and our vision slowly materialized. We launched our business, received our first clients, and felt a growing sense of accomplishment. Every new project was a step forward, a testament to our resilience. One evening, a familiar name flashed on my phone. Picking it up, I heard an all-too-familiar panicked voice. "Elena, please, you have to help me," Natalie sobbed. "What do you think you're doing, calling me?" I replied, anger bubbling. "Please, I'm scared. Daniel's manipulating everyone, turning them against me," she cried. I took a deep breath, reminding myself how deep her betrayals ran. "You made your choices, Natalie. Now live with the consequences." She begged and pleaded, but my resolve remained firm. Ending the call, I felt a weight lift. Lillian walked in, sensing the tension. "Who was that?" she asked. "Natalie," I said simply. And I let her know she's on her own. She needs to face the reality she created. Lillian nodded, hugging me. "Good. She deserves it." Our business continued to grow, each success a reminder of how far we had come. We balanced work and life, cherishing the moments we spent together. One afternoon, in between client meetings, Lillian brought up a topic I hadn't considered in years. "Mom, have you thought about dating again?" she asked gently. I laughed. "Not really. It's been a long time. But who knows? Maybe someday." Lillian smiled. "You deserve happiness, Mom. Don't close off the possibility." Her words stayed with me. A few weeks later, I decided to take a small step forward. I reconnected with Olivia, the old college friend I had coffee with, and found joy in our newfound friendship. Slowly, the idea of dating began to feel less daunting. One evening, Lillian set up an online profile for me, giggling as she chose pictures. "Trust me, Mom, you're going to have a great time." Reluctantly, I agreed. Soon, messages trickled in, and I found myself laughing at silly conversations with strangers who might become friends, or more. As my life expanded, so did Resilient Designs. We hired a small team, moved into a cozy office, and watched our dreams flourish. Our clients appreciated our work, often commenting on the passion and love we brought to each project. One day, as Lillian and I closed up the office, she turned to me, her eyes filled with pride. "Mom, we did it. We really turned everything around." "Yes, we did," I said, embracing her. "And the best part is, we did it together." Walking home, we felt a deep sense of contentment. The shadows of the past had faded, replaced by the light of our new beginnings. Daniel and Natalie's trials concluded with devastating sentences, their names forever tarnished. But we had not only reclaimed our lives, we had redefined them. Each step forward was a testament to our strength, proving that even amid life's worst storms, we could emerge stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever came next.